Today, we're going to talk about a forgotten chapter of American history. We're going back to a time when taking over a passenger jet was, believe it or not, shockingly common. In fact, between 1968 and 1972, there were over 130 commercial hijackings in the US alone. At its peak, that's more than one a week. This wasn't just a rare event. It was a full-blown epidemic.
My wife slid down, landed on her head, and I paddled her for a minute, and I had to pick her up. And the time I got her up, we were both running again. And
did you run very fast?
I ran just as fast as I could.
We were barefooted. Oh.
The constant news reports spread widespread paranoia. And for many who had lost faith in America, airplanes became ideal targets. Grabbing a multi-million-dollar jet was the most spectacular way for the marginalized to feel a sudden, intoxicating rush of power.
This is the news in detail on the hour from the WOR newsroom. 2 airline hijackings tonight in the United States, still in progress. One apparently with an anti-American political motive. The other is for big money.
The year 1972 marked the epidemic's most frenzied phase. In that year alone, 40 American skyjackings took place, each one seemingly bolder and more reckless than the last. But of all the tales from that perilous year, none is as captivating as that of Western Airlines Flight 701, commandeered by a young couple as it flew past Mount Rainier. On the morning of June 2nd, 1972, on that Western Airlines flight, a flight attendant named Gina Kutcher went to help a passenger who had spilled bourbon on his military uniform jacket. But instead of asking for a dry cleaning voucher, the man calmly placed 2 handwritten notes on the counter. "Read these," he instructed. One note began, "Success through death." It declared there were 4 hijackers and 2 bombs on board. The second was a hand-drawn diagram of a bomb inside a briefcase, listing its components: C4 plastic explosives, a clock, batteries, and a concussion grenade. At the bottom was a simple, unsettling instruction: keep smiling. The flight's captain, Jerome Juergens, was a decorated ex-Marine who knew a thing or two about explosives from flying in Korea. He took one look at the drawing and quickly determined it was no bluff. It was the work of someone who knew what they were doing. Also in the cockpit was flight engineer Thomas Crawford, who came face to face with the hijacker and later described to investigators what he saw.
Now he had also like I mentioned, a little it seemed to me like he had a spiral notepad, a small spiral notepad with very, very extensive notations.
All right.
In addition, he had the attaché case with a metal wire coming out of the metal cable. Cable's got the strand, so it's a cable situation. He had a strand cable with a ring on it that would be about an inch and, I don't know, and he had his finger in the ring with a loop on it and went back into the attaché case. He said, I have a grenade in here to which this ring is attached, and the grenade has C4 explosive. I have a C4 explosive with this grenade. And this ring goes straight to the grenade in this attaché case. He then also stated, I have to take over this airplane because I am dictated to do this by an outside group. And I have an accomplice or a partner. I'm not sure exactly about my term here. But he didn't say it was a man or a woman. I was not aware if it was a man or a woman. He said, I have another individual in the back of the airplane with the same system And if I'm not successful, that person is a backup system.
Right.
And you must comply with what I want.
And just like that, one of the most unbelievable hijackings in history was underway. A 30-hour, 7,262-mile ordeal cooked up by a traumatized Vietnam veteran named Willie Roger Holder and a party girl named Catherine Marie Kerkow. Holder's demands were audacious: $500,000 in cash, 5 parachutes, and the radical activist Angela Davis, then on trial, delivered to the plane wearing a white dress. His ultimate goal: a flight to North Vietnam for political asylum. The question is, how was any of this even remotely possible? To understand, you have to realize air travel back then was a completely different world. Before metal detectors, before ID checks, before the security lines we all know today, flying was an ethereal pleasure. You could walk from the curb right up to your gate, no ticket, no ID. But that openness created a massive vulnerability. This whole thing didn't start with ransom money and big political demands. To see how it got so out of control, we have to go back to the beginning, when it was all about getting to just one place: Cuba. These trips became so routine that people started making jokes about them. Time magazine even published a guide: what to do when the hijacker comes. So this begs the question: why didn't the airlines do something? The answer was simple economics. The cost to get a plane back from Havana was about $20,000. Putting security in every airport would cost millions. So their official policy, written in the pilot's manual, was to simply comply. This policy worked as long as hijackers just wanted a ride to Cuba. But then copycats like D.B. Cooper came along with his ransom and a parachute, and the game escalated. The plane was no longer just transportation, it was leverage. And that brings us to the chaos of 1972, when that policy of compliance was about to crash headfirst into a new reality. This is the story of that flight, and the two people at its center. It was in January of 1972 when a knock came to the door of a San Diego, California apartment. 20-year-old Cathy Kerkow, fresh from the shower, answered it. Before her stood a tall, skinny black man with manicured sideburns and tortoiseshell sunglasses. He introduced himself as Roger Holder. As they shared a joint, they both felt a strange sense of recognition, though they couldn't place it. Cathy had only been in San Diego for 5 months, having spent her life in Coos Bay, a logging town on Oregon's coast. Holder set down his coffee. Coos Bay. Yes, he said. He knew Coos Bay. He knew it very well. 13 years earlier, in 1959, 10-year-old Roger Holder and his family had been run out of that same town after a campaign of racial harassment. His father, a Navy veteran, had filed a civil rights lawsuit after his 7-year-old brother was hospitalized from a beating on the school playground. On one of their last days there, Roger and his brother came across 2 children by a secluded shoreline. An 8-year-old girl was catching what she insisted were salamanders. Roger laughed. "Those ain't salamanders," he said. "Those are tadpoles." The girl, pale and slight, with prominent ears, dangled one in front of his face. "I know a baby salamander when I see one," she snapped. "Good luck with them salamanders," Roger Holder shouted after 7-year-old Cathy Kerkow as she disappeared into the woods. The expulsion from Coos Bay left a lasting impression on Holder. In 1967, at age 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and was sent to Vietnam. He served with the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, manning an M60 machine gun. But the war took its psychological toll, and it wasn't long before he began self-medicating with marijuana. Then, on the morning of January 14, 1968, his armored carrier hit a landmine. He was knocked unconscious, his spine nearly severed, while his crewmates were killed around him. When he got out of the hospital, he returned to combat, transferring to an assault helicopter company. Unfortunately, his behavior grew more erratic and unpredictable. Like many of his fellow soldiers, Holder became disillusioned by the war. He was ultimately court-martialed for smoking a joint and sentenced to the notorious Long Bin jail. Upon his release, Holder returned to the U.S., where he bought a bus ticket to San Diego. There, he struggled to readjust to civilian life, and in December 1971, he was arrested on 8 counts of fraud. When he was paroled, he immersed himself in astrology, believing the universe had selected him for something spectacular. He was looking for an omen. It arrived when he knocked on that door and reunited with the Salamander catcher from Coos Bay. By April 1972, Holder was consumed by a plan. He would hijack a plane, swap the passengers for Angela Davis, a communist philosophy professor at UCLA who was on trial for murder, and fly her to North Vietnam. He named it Operation Sisyphus. He took reconnaissance flights, studied an Army manual on explosives, and even saw the movie Skyjacked, about a Vietnam vet who hijacks a plane.
Looks like 502's got a hijacked.
Inspired, he retrieved his own Army dress uniform, had it cleaned, and affixed a set of silver captain's bars to the collar. That weekend, he invited Kerkow to join him. After he laid out the plan, she had only one question. So, what do I wear to a hijacking? On the morning of June 2nd, 1972, at 6:15 a.m., Roger Holder stood before the mirror, meticulously adjusting his Class A Army dress uniform. Here he is, describing that surreal morning in his own words.
Woke up at 4:30 a.m. It was really quiet. Taking a shower. Tell Cathy to get up and get dressed. Just when she made that statement, you know, well, what do I wear to a hijacking? It set me to thinking, what would one wear? What else?
Right. So you, and let me ask you, so you wore your Army dress uniform. Was that
Captain's Journal, 06.
Was that a tactical decision or something you want to make a statement into?
The whole thing was a statement.
Their plan unraveled almost immediately. Kerkow's check for 2 tickets to Honolulu bounced at the Los Angeles airport. Her account was overdrawn by just $2.97. Sitting in an airport bar, they scrambled for a new plan. Kerkow remembered an unused round-trip Western Airlines ticket to Seattle her father had sent her. She exchanged it for 2 one-way tickets on Flight 701, departing at 12:50 p.m. The ticket agent gave them a cursory glance. Neither fit the behavioral profile used to screen for hijackers and were passed on through. The Boeing 727 departed at 12:35 p.m. Holder took seat 18D, while Kerkow sat 4 rows behind him in 22D, pretending to be strangers. The co-pilot, Edward Richardson, in a stroke of bad luck, had been hijacked just last month. It was about 2 hours into the flight, around the time Captain Juergens pointed out Mount Rainier, that Holder decided it was time to act. He walked to the aft galley, retrieved his black Samsonite briefcase, and presented his notes. He then raised his right hand, showing the stewardess a thin copper wire snaking from the briefcase to a metal ring around his index finger. "You have 2 minutes," he said. As the flight attendant stood frozen, Holder then mumbled, "I should have blown it up. On takeoff, blown it up. We're all gonna die anyway." In the cockpit, Captain Jurgens saw the credible threat and told the flight attendants they would comply with all demands. Holder was escorted to the cockpit. There, his meticulous plans started to come apart. He introduced himself as Richard Bradley Williams and claimed he was being forced into the hijacking by the Weathermen, a radical group who had kidnapped his children and had 4 armed members on the plane. Flight engineer Thomas Crawford calmly explained that getting $3 million on a Friday afternoon was impossible. "You'll be lucky to find $500,000, Crawford said. "Okay, $500,000 then," Holder replied. The plane was too low on fuel to turn around and head back to San Francisco, so it landed in Seattle at 3:14 p.m. to refuel. Crawford waited until they were airborne again before pointing out a critical flaw. The Boeing 727 didn't have the range to reach North Vietnam. "Get me an airplane that can," Holder demanded, forced to improvise. As news of the hijacking reached her, Angela Davis told the judge she knew nothing about the plot. Meanwhile, back aboard Flight 701, paranoia spread as passengers eyed each other, wondering who the secret hijackers were. In seat 22D, Cathy Kerkow could barely suppress a smile. The plane landed in San Francisco at 6:15 p.m. On the ground, Western's chief pilot, William Newell, located a long-range Boeing 720H and nominated himself to crew the new flight. He adamantly refused FBI demands to sneak an agent aboard, unwilling to risk a shootout. Here he is discussing what the FBI wanted to do.
After doing all this negotiating, I remember the FBI wanted to do a lot of things, and one of the things they wanted to do was get on board with guns.
Right.
And I said, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. And then they wanted to shoot the tires out. I said, no, I don't want any of that. I just didn't want anybody on board that airplane with a gun, especially the FBI.
Right.
Because I'd seen some of the things that had happened with those people in the past with other hijackings. Mm-hmm. And some of it had gotten pretty wild. Mm-hmm. I didn't think that was the thing I wanted to happen.
The transfer took place on a remote runway shortly after 8:30 that night. 27 passengers, including Kerkow, marched from the 727 to the 720H, followed by Holder with the briefcase and a bag of ransom money. As the line of hostages filed out of the first plane, Kerkow faced a choice. She could have easily slipped away and escaped. But Holder's voice boomed over the PA system. "Cathy, you stay here." She slid back into her seat. The new plane, now Flight 364, took off at 9:21 p.m. As they ascended over San Francisco Bay, Newell asked Holder for their final destination. North Vietnam was off the table. Holder consulted his notebook, his mind racing. He felt a cosmically appropriate answer well up in his throat, one rooted in his astrological readings. "Algiers," he said. The 25-hour, 7,262-mile journey, the longest distance skyjacking in American history, had begun.
Okay, less than 364 LA fast land. Okay, we're proceeding to New York by G84. All of our destination will be Algeria. And would you see if you can work on somebody getting a flight plan for us from New York to Algeria? Find an altitude for you to New York, and we'll get them working on the Algeria event. And we information you could find at all the airports in New York, North, the weather there is fairly decent at this time.
They flew east, landing at JFK in New York at 5:12 a.m. There they refueled and picked up a transatlantic navigator. A tense standoff with the FBI ensued, but the passengers were finally released. Kerkow remained on board. In the now empty cabin, she and Holder reunited, sharing a joint under a blanket before joining the Mile High Club, or at least their version of it. At 6:25 that morning, the plane took off for the last time, bound for Algeria. As they approached North Africa, Holder had one last demand. He told the crew he wanted Eldridge Cleaver, the exiled leader of the Black Panther Party, to meet him at the airport. The plane touched down at Maison Blanche at 6:57 p.m. local time. Holder and Kerkow walked down the stairs, greeted by the head of Algeria's secret police. "Welcome to Algeria," he told him. "You're home now, brother." Inside the VIP lounge, Cleaver's first words to Holder were, "So, where's the bread?" The Samsonite briefcase was opened. Inside was an alarm clock, a book on astrology, and an empty box of razors. There was no bomb. The entire operation had been a monumental bluff. Holder and Kerkow had pulled off the longest distance skyjacking in American history without a single real weapon. The aftermath was immediate. A 24-hour international pilot strike was called to protest lax security. The U.S. government condemned Western Airlines for its policy of compliance. This hijacking, along with a subsequent one where hijackers threatened to crash a plane into a nuclear research facility, was the last straw. This was a nightmare scenario, almost 30 years before 9/11. The game had changed. The government had to act. The solution was two key steps. First, on January 5, 1973, the Nixon administration mandated that all airline passengers and their carry-on bags be physically screened. Then, a month later, the U.S. and Cuba signed a long-anticipated extradition pact. The results were immediate and absolute. In 1972, there were nearly 30 hijackings. In 1973, there was just one. The 12-year epidemic that terrorized the skies just stopped. The golden age of hijacking was over. For Holder and Kerkow, life in Algiers was not the revolutionary paradise they envisioned. The Algerian government decided they were just a couple of pedestrian troublemakers, rather than visionaries, and confiscated the ransom money and returned it to the U.S. By the start of 1973, Roger Holder had grown deeply disillusioned with the revolutionary dream that once fueled him. Algeria, imagined as a sanctuary for radicals and outcasts, had become something else entirely. A place of fractured loyalties, broken promises, and quiet paranoia. Holder described his time in Algiers as a bitter awakening. The people he'd believed were freedom fighters now seemed to him more like opportunists. His resentment centered on Eldridge Cleaver, the exiled Black Panther leader whom he called a phony. When Cleaver caved to political pressure and stepped down, whatever faith Holder had left in the movement collapsed with him. The air in Algiers had turned hostile. The Algerian government, once welcoming, had begun distancing itself from the Panthers after Cleaver's insults of Algerian President Houari made headlines around the world. The so-called international section, already splintered by infighting, crumbled almost overnight. Holder briefly tried to lead what remained, but the stress consumed him. He became restless, paranoid, certain that he and Cathy Kerkow were being watched, that their names had been marked for assassination. Life in exile had become suffocating. The long days, the handouts, the gnawing boredom. Even their relationship began to fray under the weight of isolation and fear. By January 1974, they'd had enough. Using false passports, the couple slipped out of Algeria and made their way to Paris. For Holder, it was less an escape than a surrender, the quiet end of a revolution that had already died inside him. In France, they moved in the circles of leftist intellectuals like Jean-Paul Sartre and Yves Montand. Kerkow thrived, enjoying a life of fashion and romance. Holder, however, continued to decline, forever battling his post-traumatic stress disorder from his time in Vietnam. Still fugitives, their life on the run ended abruptly in the winter of 1975, when French authorities caught them with fake passports. But rather than deporting them back to the US, France hesitated. The hijacking, they came to believe, had been an act of protest, not profit, a crime of politics, not greed. And so, the couple was allowed to stay. For a time, life in France seemed content. But beneath the quiet streets and cafe chatter, something inside Roger Holder was unraveling. His paranoia deepened, his trust eroded. Kerkow tried to hold it together, but the man beside her was no longer the one she had fled with. By February of 1978, she'd made her decision. She left him an expensive Omega watch, a strange, almost tender goodbye, and told him she was leaving for Geneva. Just for a few days, she said. That was the last time Roger Holder ever saw the Salamander catcher from Coos Bay. After Kerkow disappeared, Roger Holder stayed in France. He spent a few years living quietly, even spending time in a Norman chateau owned by a count. Then, in July of 1986, after serving time for an unrelated assault, the French government finally deported him to the United States. There, the past caught up with him. He pleaded guilty to federal air piracy charges and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was released in August of 1989 and paroled to San Diego. For a while, things were quiet. That is, until the summer of 1991, when he decided to try one more time. Roger Holder was arrested once again, this time in connection with a foiled plot to hijack another passenger jet. It began with an informant. The man told federal agents that Holder had been asking around for plastic explosives. An undercover officer, posing as a gun runner, met with him in person. During that meeting, Holder allegedly asked for detonators, weapons, and enough explosives to take down an airplane. He told him he planned to demand millions of dollars in ransom, and if he didn't get it, he'd strap the explosives to his body and blow it up. Investigators later concluded that whatever ideology he claimed to stand for, the truth was simpler. His real motive was money. Holder was described by agents as a man trapped in another era, still talking about Vietnam, still seeing the world through the haze of a 1960s revolution. His probation officer described him bluntly, a paranoid schizophrenic. When agents searched his home, they found no explosives, no weapons, only an armored vest and a handwritten manuscript titled Terror by Fiat, his own story of the 1972 hijacking. With little evidence to hold him, authorities let him go. Holder returned home, back to the same quiet apartment, the same silence, and the same demons he'd never escaped. The years that followed were quiet. Holder faded from public view, living off disability checks in a small San Diego apartment. The man who had once commandeered an airliner for the revolution now lived out his days in near total obscurity. Then, on February 6, 2012, Roger Holder told his partner he no longer wished to live. Hours later, he was gone, dead from a ruptured brain aneurysm. He was 62 years old. They buried him in a military cemetery. A quiet, unremarkable ending for a man whose defiance once captivated the world and forever changed the way we fly. As for Kerkow, she remains on the FBI's most wanted list. Decades later, her face still stares back from an aging poster. Her whereabouts, a mystery to this day.